What's up, YouTube? So today we're going to talk a little bit about stealth. Like, what is it really? What is required to live stealth in a city? And you may have a couple of reasons for wanting to do this. It might be that you just want to reduce your cost of living and live in a vehicle to do that, and sort of use that as a life hack, maybe towards the goal you want. You don't want to leave your job, you just want to save more money, and you want to you're kind of examining how viable it is to do that by living in the city out of a vehicle. I don't know, maybe you're in college and you just can't afford housing, and so you're trying to balance that with like living in a vehicle. And maybe you want to go out exploring, but you realize sometimes you are going to have to stay in cities, or you want access to cities. Like, you don't want to just be out in the woods or the forest or whatever. You also, or you either exclusively or want the option to be able to go into a city, hang out, see the sights, go to the bars, go do this, go do that. And so you're wondering, like, what does it take to make a vehicle stealth? And that's probably why stealth videos are so popular. There's a lot of places where being able to stealth park is important, or something you may want, or something you may need, like in my case. So for people who are new to my channel, I started out in a car, and it was not by choice, and I don't have a lot of videos from that point, because there was a point where I feel like I chose, when I got my minivan, like that was a choice. I said, I am going to do this. I'm going to do this because I feel like this is going to be a more sustainable way for me to live. And so far it has been, since I committed to the minivan, and then I had the Chevy van, and now I have this box truck, which is very much built out like a tiny house. And a lot of times now people will be like, of course you're comfortable now. You have a driveway to park in. You have something that's the size of like a little mini house. You have X, you have Y, you have Z. And that's like since 2018, when this all started. That is a very recent part of my history, and ignores the fact that for the majority of the time I've been in vehicles I could not stand in. And I have lived mostly a city life, and it's been by necessity of working and needing to make money. Like, I couldn't abandon the idea of making money, and I was in the position of living out of a vehicle, and then I changed that from a forced position to a choice position, which I think you can do while you're in the middle of it, because I did it. But that being said, going back to living in the car, when I was living in my car, I'd moved to the West Coast. I had come to the West Coast for an internship, and that internship had housing. So I was originally in housing, but I came here on a plane with basically a suitcase and a few boxes I'd shipped ahead of myself. So I didn't have a ton of belongings out on the West Coast. And in fact, I had a bunch of stuff in a storage unit out on the East Coast that unfortunately ended up sitting there because I thought I was going to go back. Like, that was the original plan. I was going to go back, and I was going to go back and live on the East Coast after this was over. But I got to the West Coast, and I decided to stay. And after I left the internship, I had to get my own housing, and I did, and I ended up renting a room, and it was really not cheap to rent rooms in the Bay Area, but I was starting to build connections that were leading to work, and I wanted to stay. So you have to deal with the cost and price of things in the area you're in. So that's what I did. I got myself a rented room. I used to rent rooms out in the DC, Maryland area, which is not cheap by any means, especially like closer to DC. But man, I would find really cheap rooms where I could pay a couple of $100 a month and stay in a room. And what people were charging to have like a curtained off space in their living room was like ridiculous in the Bay. But I finally found a place, and for a while it was fine. Now that place already had a bed, so again, I didn't really need big furniture or to fill up a whole house or even a whole apartment. So when that situation collapsed, and I just don't want to go into the details. I don't really consider it, relevant. The point is, the situation fell apart. I couldn't find alternative housing, and so the only option I had while I was continuing the search was to start living out of my car. And during that process, that's when I kind of sort of jumped on YouTube and found videos of people living out of their cars. A lot of them were travelers, but one of the ones that really impacted me was Hobo Alley, because Hobo Alley was like not that, like there was a decent bridge of like, sometimes I go out and I do these climbing adventures, but also I just work a job and I live in this little car. And eventually she did get a van and all that, but I was just looking for information. That being said, when I first started sleeping in my car, I didn't do anything to it. It was just a car. Like, I parked legally on the street, where my car could park. I put down my front seat and I went to sleep. And this went on for a while I was still trying to figure out, what do other people do in this situation? And I was also continuing to look for solutions for housing at this time. I was going through government agencies and all that, and like, things were either going to take a long time or they just weren't working out. And if it was going to take a long time, I knew I had to figure out how to get by in my situation until it could be changed. And the good thing about that experience, even if I want to pull anything good out of it, I was also a pet sitter. So every once in a while, I was staying in a house because I was on a pet sitting app. I didn't say on the app that I was like homeless or anything, but the good thing was I was only available to do in-house pet sitting. So every once in a while during this time, I got to stay in a house and take care of some animals, and it was great. But point being, I didn't do anything to hide the fact that I was sleeping in my front seat. Now, if somebody did walk past on the street and see me, they either had two ideas. One, I was just tired and I had, just gone to sleep in my front seat, or I was going through a bad situation and they just let me be. Either way, it's sort of the reminder, looking back at that I had a very quick introduction that just being quote unquote seen isn't the end of the world as long as people don't think you're a problem. And I think I've sort of carried the mentality through into the future of my stealth life van dwelling. I, even with this box truck, have spent a bunch of time in cities parking on regular streets. There hasn't been a lot of like, oh my god, I have this big vehicle now, so what am I going to do? Because I've also observed people getting away with parking in all kinds of places with rather large vehicles. Now, whether they were living in them full time or not, they were clearly campers. And that's another thing you have to remember. Camper does not mean full-time van dweller. It means camper. Like, if a vehicle is outfitted in a way that makes it a camper, it doesn't mean somebody is living in it full time. It means somebody owns a camper. That's all it means. Now, if people are posted up in huge groups in an encampment, that means they probably live in those vehicles full time, and that's a whole other can of worms to get into. But I personally, there was a street where there was a lot of RVs parked, and when I got my minivan, I remember I parked on that street a couple of times. But also I felt like eventually this, if somebody's going to get targeted, if people are going to decide they don't like this is the area they're going to target. Whereas if I go off and I'm just one random vehicle on the street, I'm just one random vehicle on the street. And a lot of times people will ignore one random vehicle on the street. And with that, I started to really think about, like, what ruins stealth, really? Like, people have a lot of opinions on, oh, that's not stealth, this is not stealth. But what ruins stealth, really? And I feel like ever since I started van life, people have very specific ideas about this, and they've more often than not, they've been just flat out wrong. Just a few of the things people will say ruin your stealth because they know you're in there. Roof vents, solar panels, cargo carriers, rear carriers, carrying absolutely anything outside your vehicle, visible markings on your rig unless they are a fake company which will support your stealth. It's not untrue. Like, if somebody is looking, these things will say, oh, this is probably a camper. But does it mean you live in it full time? No. So, roof vents. I hate to tell you this, but most people who don't camp and have never exposed themselves to camper vans don't even know what they are. There are other types of commercial vehicles with things on top. The most common is the refrigerator van. I mean, just look at these refrigerator vans. Are they stealth campers or commercial vehicles? I can tell you, most regular old people can't tell. They don't actually even know the difference between what's on top of your van and what's on top of the refrigeration truck. Especially if you have a plain white van and a plain white roof vent. Now, I will say having a plain white van and nothing that looks really weird or out of place can help you in this instance. But even if your van isn't a plain white van, most regular people, if it's a van, just don't know the difference. As for solar panels, either people see them and don't know why they are there or don't know they are solar panels. On my minivan, I had one little 100-watt panel and I had people mistake it for a roof rack just because they didn't look close enough and only maybe saw the silver rim of it. Most people, again, who have never been camping and have never done van life and do not care about van life, their first assumption isn't going to be, why does that vehicle have solar panels? Yours will be because you're interested in van life. It's also highly unlikely that for the second it's in the corner of their eye, they even noticed. If you were tipping solar panels on your roof in the middle of a downtown metropolitan area, yeah, they might notice. But if they're just sitting there, believe me, they won't. If you haven't been sitting there for weeks and nobody's really had a reason to give it a close examination, a flat piece of metal on your roof makes zero difference. So I did a whole video on exterior storage, touching on rear carriers, cargo carriers, bike racks, etc., etc. Many people who travel or enjoy outdoor activities carry things on the outside of their vehicles. Not only may they not live in them full time, they may not even camp at them at all. They just needed a vehicle that could handle hauling whatever equipment they need to haul to the place where they enjoy said activity. I used to hang out at a marina where I mistaked several vans for camper vans that weren't, which I saw when they opened their doors and the whole family piled out. They were basically carrying water-based activity gear and needed a vehicle big enough to handle that water-based activity gear. Having very generic things that people take to special locations to use, such as canoes and bikes outside of your rig, is probably fine, as long as it's kind of a generic looking van. Families do buy vans just to transport people. Organizations buy vans just to transport people. And if you're at a beach or a park or somewhere like that, somebody could have put a bunch of people in a van and driven it down there, and they may have needed gear to come along as well. However, in the case of things outside your rig, if you have a sloppy bag of kitchen items strapped to your roof, that's a different story. If you have a bag of clothing strapped to your roof, that's a different story. If you have a very clean cargo carrier or rear carrier and you are able to park without impeding parking, it's probably fine. Nobody's going to stress out that much and go, oh my God, cargo carrier, somebody lives in there full time. These items do not mean someone is living in their vehicle full time. It may mean that they camp in their vehicle sometimes, but they also use it to do things like drive to the store and run errands or park on the street while visiting friends. And you are projecting into other people's minds that because you know you're using it for full-time living, that they'll know you're using it for full-time living. And that's not about them. That's about you. So for people who want to do YouTube, it is a business. So when it comes to the case of exterior markings, yeah, if your vehicle has text advertising a YouTube channel about van life and you're parking on a public street, you have a high chance of getting recognized or targeted. I did have removable magnets for my YouTube channel, and I did it because it seemed like other people were getting away with it. And I did have a vandal target me for it, but it was a vandal. Literally no one called the cops on me, and I did fall asleep a couple of times and forgot they were just sitting on there. So, what I think actually ruins stealth is not fitting in. And what do I mean by not fitting in? Is there something about your vehicle that flat out looks weird? Like it jumps itself out. Now that doesn't mean you have to have done anything. Honestly, a plain white van that's always in the same spot and doesn't move might start to stand out, even if it's a plain white van. All it takes is for somebody to realize, wait, why is that there all the time? Well, it's one thing if your plain white van showed up and it could have belonged to, like, you know, the plumbing guy who came to work on your neighbor's sink and it was there once and then it was gone. Like, that's one thing. But if it's just always there and it never moves, or on the flip side, always coming back up to the same spot, there is the possibility that somebody in the neighborhood could be like, all right, now I'm worried that this is a pedophile or kidnapper or something, because there is that stereotype about the plain white van, and it still exists. So they may think you are something to be afraid of, and they may not see you at all. You may be thinking you're so cool, they never see me, but in not seeing you, it also may be problematic. Now, I personally, because, like, I'm female, I do think there is a sense of, oh, that lady's not bothering anybody. On occasion, and again, this is me projecting what I think thoughts are. It's like, oh, that lady's not bothering anybody, and, you know, she's gonna leave, and she never makes a mess. And so the people may start to feel that. Now, they also may go, no, if people see her getting away with it, then other people will want to get away with it. And I don't want to invite that into my neighborhood. But again, you have to be there so much that these thoughts start occurring. So even if your vehicle is the picture of stealth, if you're going to the same place all the time, that could ruin stealth, no matter what your vehicle looks like, no matter how many solar panels you do or don't have, no matter if you have cargo carriers or not. Like, what is actually going to ruin your stealth in that case is your presence, your behavior, being there all the time. What you want people to think, if they think anything at all, is, oh, every once in a while I see that truck. Oh, every once in a while I see that car. Oh, every once in a while I see that van, but it's always gone, doesn't cause any trouble. It hasn't done anything that makes me care that it shows up every once in a while. And so, yeah, you have to get out the mentality that everybody cares about what you're doing every second. Another thing is, nobody can see if you're in your vehicle or not. So if it's not obvious that you are quote unquote in your vehicle and you're on a regular street where people are just walking past, they don't need to have a reason to look at you any more they would any other parked car. And in that case, there's a lot that your vehicle can look like that's obvious, but it's just another parked car legally on the street. Now, you do have to be aware of parking timetables for the legal sense, but for some reason, people think you can park way less time than you can. I mean, people go to work and park on a street for like 8 hours. People go visit their friends and go to parties at their friend's house in neighborhoods they don't live in and are there for hours and hours. And I'm sure if somebody has the family barbecue, even if they're your neighbor, you don't know every car in that block or who it belongs to. If somebody has a friend who comes over and the neighborhood is a street parking neighborhood, they don't know every car in the block. There may be people who are going to a house 3 blocks away, but the only parking they could find was nowhere near the house for whatever reason, just because parking is tight. And maybe people have never lived in these types of neighborhoods. I have for my entire life. Like, I believe I lived in one place that had a driveway. Otherwise, it was the wild, wild west, just finding somewhere your vehicle could squeeze in legally on the street while you were either staying there overnight or visiting or whatever, or living there even. I've lived places where I couldn't park directly in front of my house. And I didn't have to run out all the time and move my vehicle. I parked it, I locked it up, I left, and I went in the house. All you have to do is eliminate the whole leaving it and going in the house part, and then find a place where it's okay for you to street park in the middle of the night. And I also feel like people are way too committed to parking lots. I have done parking lot parking. I've done a lot of parking lot parking, but you don't have to park in a parking lot. And in fact, parking lots are actually more risky because, yes, maybe your van blends in with like vans that are parked there overnight for the business. Great. But if at any point somebody goes, wait, and they look too closely, you can end up with a knock. And they have every right to knock. The parking lot is actually private property. While Walmart, because Walmart comes up a lot, has no particular policy as a full company against RV parking, and in fact there's a lot of places where they totally welcome RVers. The thing is, there's two things going on. There's Walmart as a personal broad strokes company, then there's Walmart local situation, and then there's Walmart local laws. And why am I differentiating these two? So there's local situation where they were open to it and then somebody ruined it, and then there's local laws where it's like it can't be allowed because it violates local laws. And those could impact a Walmart in an area you're in. So just assuming because it's Walmart, you can park in the parking lot is a fallacy. There are places in the country where you can't. There are places where you used to and now they don't like it. And it's because everybody advertised, oh, you're homeless or living in a van by choice or whatever, go to the Walmart. And I'm sure Walmart's got overrun at that point. And so I don't blame them for being very, very cautious and protective of their parking lots. There are parking lots where I've gotten away with it. And usually I just read the area. And so to take a look around and think, if I like slide in here tonight and stay still, is there a high likelihood of me getting bothered? And I've been not bothered more than I've been bothered. Every time I've gotten a knock, it has been a security guard and it has been in a parking lot. I've literally never had a problem sleeping on the street because I just find a spot where I can clearly park legally. I park for the night and then I leave in the morning. Even if I have nowhere to go, I will just get on my phone. I will find like a local park and I will drive there, and anything I need to do in the morning, that is where I will do it, especially in a strange area where maybe I was like, I think I could park here overnight. So I try it, I get away with it, but as soon as daylight hits, it's time for me to move to another spot. And again, people panic so much about this, but it may take me 10 minutes. There may be like a local park 10 minutes away, and it was the middle of the night, and I just parked, and I didn't want to worry about it. And then in the morning, when I have daylight, I may have to take a 10-15 minute drive to like a local park, pull up in a parking spot, and you can hang out at a local park, most of them all day. Like, that's what it's for. It's for people to randomly show up, hang out, do activities, and then move on with their life. You know, and a lot of them are open from dusk till dawn. So you have to leave at night. Don't be trying to get away with sleeping there just because you were there all day. There is a lot of options. That's one of many options you can use. Like I mentioned, the marina I used to hang out with. That was a very nice all-day hangout spot. It was pretty, you know, there were clearly other van lifers doing exactly what I was doing. And as long as you left at night, you were within the rules, because it's a public area for public use, but you have to use it in the right way. And that is sort of the key point of stealth. It's about using it in the right way. It's really when you start camping somewhere that's not a campground that you get yourself into trouble, such as a shopping center parking lot. Your lawn chair and your grill and assorted items should not be pulled out and set up for a meal. Have I seen people do this and get away with it? Totally. I've seen people get away with many things, but I've also seen it blow up in people's faces, or because they did it, it made it harder for other people. One day they are getting away with it, but a week later the cops are getting called on everybody, even the people who are following the rules. And why would you want to do that anyway? If you need to outside cook, as I said, most metro areas have public parks where you not only may be able to set up in a table at cook, you may find other resources that you can use during the day. Just don't abuse parking lots. As I said, parking lots are, to me, more risky than street parking. If it's a place where people have decided to look the other way, you can get a nice sleep and move on in the morning. But parking lots are private property and have been very, very abused over the years. So camping in clusters when you're out in the boonies is great. It is generally bad in a city. Nothing gives away what you are doing more than a huge gathering of vehicles. One camper van, even a very obvious camper van, might be something most people look the other way on. As soon as vans and RVs start gathering in groups, and it seems to be a welcome and encouraged thing, that's when cops get involved, as people start to see it as an eyesore. You don't have to be in a fancy van to avoid being an eyesore. You just have to take care of your vehicle. I have been in cities and towns and areas in the gray area in between in my box truck for long stretches. Actually, when I first got to Ashland, that's what I was doing. I was street parking around Ashland. And it's way more about a regulation of my behavior and parking legally and not staying anywhere too long in order to be left alone. It's not about the vehicle itself. It is to a point, but it's not totally about the vehicle. People are so focused on what makes the vehicle not stealth as opposed to what behavior makes you not stealth. And then people think, well, oh my God, I have to run around all the time. I'm going to be, have to unpark and park and unpark and like always be ducking and dodging. And it's not that difficult, is it? You're making it way harder than it actually is. Again, it's about legally parking, not overstressing and looking like a parked car. If you are not comfortable parking a large vehicle, or navigating the space of having a larger vehicle, if you have like a bus or box truck or anything that's a little bit bigger, even if you have a van, like if all you've driven is a car, and that's one of the reasons I really liked the minivan at first, because a minivan is very close to a car. You know, it doesn't really feel that different when you're driving it. As soon as I moved up to the Chevy Express, I definitely felt bulkier. In a very different way. And when I got the box truck, there were way more blind spots. So parallel parking is hard to impossible. And sometimes if I can't flat out pull in, I won't pull in. But my reluctance to park in some of the spots I find has way more to do with my fear about parking the box truck than and not hitting something than my fear of getting a knock because I'm in a box truck, if that makes any sense. Like, that's not what's scaring me in those situations. And there are places you can park where there's street parking. It's city legal. You can park there overnight and get away with it. There's no signage indicating otherwise, where you are not in the direct eyesight of anybody going in and out of a house. Neighborhoods don't just have houses, especially in city neighborhoods with street parking. Sometimes they have churches on the block. Sometimes they have little convenience stores on the block. Sometimes the house just has like one of those weird corners where like one side is totally a wall of a fence. And all these places are prime places to like go, oh, okay, I could park here. And you just pull in a park and call it a night. There's also like little strips of business streets with street parking that just have all businesses on them. So, like, there's no neighbors to look out of a window and see you slipping in your car. You just have to really look around. And it's hard to bottle that into a list of rules for people, because people really want this list. Like, go here, do this, do this, do this. And it's like, I can give you a vague idea of sort of how I navigate the situation, but you kind of have to live it and learn how to look for it in a certain way so that you are within a legal gray. You are looking to bend the rules, not break them. So you're not looking to stake claim to space in the Walmart parking lot. You are looking for where you can legally park, stop for long enough to sleep, then unpark from that spot and hang out for the day if you don't have a job, or you need some place to go on a weekend. If you have a job, it's really easy. Like, you find a couple of places you can sleep, you go to sleep, you go to work in the morning. And then you're parked at work, wherever you're allowed to park at work. Now, in that case, you do have to think about what parking is available to you at work. And if you do decide to get a larger vehicle, you do have to ask yourself if that vehicle would be parkable in the space where you go to work. Now, for people who are just worried about stopping in a city when they're traveling, when I am traveling, I tend to stick to truck stops as often as possible, and that's when I might do sort of like Cabela's. I haven't found a lot of Cabela's in a lot of places where I've had to live, but when I'm traveling, I'll keep that in my back pocket. I'll maybe keep Walmart in my back pocket. But I tend to stick to truck stops and rest areas. If I'm trying to get from A to B, just from A to B. And in the middle, I don't plan to do a bunch of stopping. I'm not going to go off into the wilds and look for boondocking if I have a particular A to B goal I'm trying to meet. And I may not want to stress out about driving around the city trying to find a place to park. And a lot of times, rest areas and truck stops are perfect for this because they usually are right on a main road. You pull off, you go to sleep. I usually say it like truck stops, and every rest area I've been in, it has been gorgeous. Some of the most gorgeous places I've been. I was at a rest area with a lake one time. I wanted to hang out there all day. You weren't really allowed to. So yeah, though that's the easiest thing for me, especially like if you, let's say your goal is to get to a certain campground and you're in a place. If you are an adventurer, hey, go off the road, find as many adventures as they want. Where you're like, I just want to get to my campsite, or I just want to get to my goal place, or I just want to get from here to there, and it's a long stretch, and I don't know what's going to be going on in the cities in between. Truck stops and rest areas are great. At truck stops, you can refuel, you can get food, all that stuff. Truck stops are like my favorite thing. And then rest areas, again, you'll have access to bathrooms, just like the truck stop. At the truck stop, you can get a shower too a lot of times. So if you're at a rest area, like a legit like rest area stop that's like an actual, like, it has buildings with toilets and might have a vending machine if you haven't eaten and you just want something quick and you don't want to like cook food, you have a whole house with you. Maybe in my case, like, I could like stop and cook food. I can cook a whole meal. But if you can't do that, or you're too tired, or you get to a rest area, a lot of times they have vending machines, and so you can just grab a snack and a beverage, get back in your vehicle and like go to sleep, and then get up in the morning to continue forward. You don't necessarily need to either force yourself out into the boonies or force yourself into a strange city. These things are really, really great to set up as markers along the way, to stop on purpose maybe, and just rejuvenate yourself while you're refueling the car maybe. So yeah, that's just my advice for that. Now, while I've been in Ashland, I've seen both a bus and an RV around town that someone or someones are definitely living in. No, I haven't asked them for a tour or shown their images on the internet because I consider that disrespectful. And banging on a stranger's urban van dweller home outside of like a group camp situation is more than a little bit rude. And I haven't had the luck of seeing them exiting their rig because they're smart. Both rigs move around town and are never in the same spot from day to day. And when I told one of my coworkers, all my coworkers know I live in a box truck, by the way, that there's clearly a short bus and a van in town that people are living in, they said, "Really? I haven't noticed." They haven't noticed a whole van and a whole short bus. I am sure if a short bus and a little Class C were always parked in the same place and other vehicles begin to join up with them in a straight line and begin treating street side parking like their own personal campground, it would be the beginning of the end. It would raise protests from the neighbors and very much get them noticed. Neither one of their vehicles would pass most people's stealth tests. Yet here they are in a small town getting away with urban van dwelling. And keep in mind, the float is the most important thing for stealth. Even if you have the most plain white van, if it just sits too long without moving, that can possibly attract the fear of kidnapping, rapists, pedophile, or otherwise undesirable people, including like drug addicts, which is its own complicated thing because drug addicts need help, not for us to malign them. That's why I say stealth is more than what your vehicle looks like on the outside. While you don't want to have the loudest, proudest Vanlife van ever if you have to be city tied, you also don't have to live in fear of things that add comfort to your life, like solar panels and roof vents. People just tend to ignore a one-off vehicle that's there and gone, even if it shows up once a week. I am not saying this is universally true in all cities, because somebody in the comments will be like, I was doing the right thing and I still got harassed all the time. But I can say since 2018, using city floating, not being in the same place all the time, being aware of where I can park legally and for how long, I haven't been bothered. except in parking lots where they were cracking down anyway due to previous incidents. And even when I got those knocks, it wasn't a bad situation. Yeah, there's always that startle of getting it in the first place. But it's been a lot of, sorry, you can't park here overnight. It's always been a security guard, not a cop. And it's been like, okay, I fire up my engine and I move on. I don't stay places where I feel unsafe. Like, period. I just don't. I would say I've had access actually through living in vehicles to places that are safer than places I could actually afford if I had to return to them. You know, there's been neighborhoods where I definitely was facing a bigger crime rate than where I parked my vehicle overnight to grab some sleep. I can actually choose to leave if I feel uncomfortable. I couldn't turn the key in my house or my apartment or my rented room and drive somewhere else. I was stuck there no matter what was going on. So given all that, let's take a moment to look at some polls I put up. So I did a poll that asks, what scares you more, sleeping in a car in a city street, sleeping in a car alone in a forest or BLM land, or sleeping in a car in general. Just out of curiosity, just to sort of gauge sort of people's line. The majority of people, why I did this video, are actually intimidated by sleeping in a car in the city, more so than a forest or BLM land, and some people are just intimidated by the idea in general. Now, I only put alone down for the middle option, but I kind of was implying alone for all of them. I need my tea, guys. So let's look at some of the responses and sort of get into what some people are worried about when it comes to sleeping alone in a city. And my personal thought is, in the forest or BLM land or out in the middle of nowhere, your bigger worry, unless you're at a campground or something like that, is probably animals and nature more than people, just because you're a little bit further out, and so it's harder, not impossible, but harder to get access to people, and there's ways that you can mitigate this situation, but that would be the more scary part of being out there. Not so much people. Like, people worry about, like, somebody who I guess is living in the woods and just gonna randomly attack you. Like, until you've been out in the middle of nowhere, you don't really understand how isolating that is, and that, you know, the likelihood of somebody just rolling up on you, maybe another camper, I guess, but it's very thin if you're really doing remote camping. But anyway, let's bring up this next thing. And so Mama Mia 555 sort of illustrates the big difference. At least in a city street, someone could help or police can find you, which could be a negative or positive depending on your perspective. Who knows what's lurking in the forest out nowhere, wild animals and maniacs. A lot of the maniacs are actually in the city. So while the city has the people that could help you, they also have the people most likely to hurt you. Depending on where you park, how you park, and how aware you are of your environment. But the good thing is, in either case, as long as your engine's running and your vehicle's in good condition, you can turn that key and get out of there. They have to get to you first. And if you're locking your doors and generally following smart practices, there should be something that alerts you that somebody is in your vehicle in the most ideal situation. And it depends on how panicked you are about this stuff or not. Here's the thing about nature. It's not just about the animals. Like, there's insects and bugs and bad weather and storms and wind. Like, I was in a windstorm where I was kind of nervous. And I was buttoned down on the inside, but I was really nervous I might get blown over or something. There's the possibility of your vehicle breaking down and you at least needing to get started up enough to get where you can get help. And sometimes that could be a challenge, but there are solutions and ways to sort of be prepared for all of these things. But when it comes to quote unquote wild animals in the middle of nowhere. It isn't all about like lions and tigers and bears, which can be a real thing, but it's about like little things, and especially nature in and of itself, and being aware also of what kind of weather situations you're driving into and what that means for how you have to be ready and prepared. On a city street, yes, it's very easy to find somebody if something is going wrong, and it's also really easy to find people to make things go wrong. And so it's sort of a catch-22 type situation. Ramona Helpwell says, I'm afraid to be out all alone. I'm more comfortable with people and some kind of noise, or I would have a partner with me. I will say it was really weird for me the first time I sort of was camping out in the middle of nowhere, even with other people around, because everybody was in bed and it was just so dead silent. And it's way eerie compared to like a little bit of white city noise. Like, I'm very used to white city noise, and it's actually easier for me to sleep with the idea that I have that white city noise as opposed to it not existing. So I totally feel you. But I got used to both. Like, really. Life of Anthony says, I am not one to be out in the boondocks alone. No sirree, Bob. Sarah Copperna says, been there and done that in parking lot and side of the street, not fearing BLM or forest. Always use care and be aware of your surroundings, which I think is a good general rule. Like, always be aware of where you are and what the dangers are of where you are. The same things aren't true everywhere, you know? And so your level of fear needs to not be universal, but adjusted to the situation. You know? So clearly seeing that people's biggest fear was city dwelling, city living, city parking, I went to street parking fears type of poll, and the actual wording of the poll was, yes, I'm clicking on files and bringing them up, guys. The question is, what scares you more about sleeping in a van or on a public street? And I put cops, criminals, and looky-loos in the neighborhood. There was a lot of arguments in the comments about sort of which two things complement each other, so it doesn't make sense to separate them. But I think there's a lot of arguments that can be made. Like, some people say where there's cops, there's criminals. Where there's criminals, there's cops. That's not true. There's plenty of areas that, for some reason, get the cops up in there really quick, and they don't even have that many criminals, but they can get cops at the drop of a dime. And then there's places where there's a lot of criminals, but you can't find a cop to save your life. And as far as like looky-loos in the neighborhood, looky-loos in the neighborhood aren't a threat in and of themselves. I think it's more they could be the ones to either themselves actually leave, or take action to get you to leave, or decide because they've had a bad experience before, they're going to put that experience on you, and treat you as a vagrant no matter what your personal behavior is. But they also could just call the cops, or they could be thieves themselves, you know, so it could go either way. I don't think any of these are inherently tied in a way that can't be untied. And so I just wonder what people were more afraid of. Also, with criminals, people seem to focus a lot on fighting criminals. When I say criminals, I mean people who will vandalize your vehicle. I'm talking about smash and grabs. I'm talking about things people can do to a vehicle that isn't necessarily them even knowing you are in there. Like, people, I used to think stealth was good because I didn't want people to know I was in there. Now I'd rather be assumed I was in there because I'm less worried about the cops being called on me the way I park than a criminal decided to target my vehicle because they think it's empty. Like, most of the things that's happened to me have been predicated on just being an empty vehicle. Like, I had the window smashed out the Chevy Express van, and basically it was a smash and grab. They didn't steal the vehicle. They weren't trying to fight me. They didn't know I was in there because I wasn't in there. In fact, it got targeted because it was empty at the time, and I unfortunately left a charger on the seat, and that is what they stole. It was actually one of those little boosters that you use to self-jump yourself, and they broke in and they stole that. So it wasn't a situation where being prepared to fight would have been a big deal. It was more like somebody saw an opportunity to steal something and they stole it. I had a smash and grab while I was in the car. Well, I wasn't physically in the car. Again, I was outside of the car. I had a box of things in the back seat that weren't even that great. So I assumed this was like a drug addict or something, especially, again, learning to adjust your neighborhood. I was in a neighborhood where that was a possibility, and they were just looking for anything to steal that they could, sell for money. And so they smashed the back window and stole it. Specifically, while I was not in there. I was in a friend's house, with them. And it happened. And I slept in their house that night. And that's when the smash and grab happened. Not while I was in there. But at the end of the day, that was the home I was going back to. So it was not fun. So yeah, that's where we are with that stuff. It's kind of, yeah. Let's get into some of your comments, which I'm sure I'll readdress some of this stuff. Romans 8:28 says, I lived in my car in the city and the police were the biggest problem I had day and night. I am sorry to hear that. It just really sucks. I don't know if I'm in the fortunate position of just never having that be a problem, but it just never was a problem. Like I said, I've only gotten knocks from security. It was parking lots. It was a polite situation, and I moved on, and it's been so rare that it's not even something I worry about. It doesn't mean it's not a legit worry elsewhere. Tracy Murray says, there's a converted moving box truck that cleverly parks some important word here, overnights the weekends in my townhouse community, and I love it. They only removed 2 letters of the well-known company's logo, so it honestly looks like someone rented a box truck to move and just parked it overnight at the rental office parking, like anyone could do. And I never see a person lingering around it or going in and out. Super stealthy. And I think the key word here is some. So somebody who's like converted a box truck is being very smart here. And the one person who noticed is like, that's cool. There's probably a bunch of people who haven't noticed at all. And so they use this particular spot every once in a while. They're using it in a very calculated way, and that is a smart way to do the stealth van life. Not only is the box itself stealthy by playing a little bit with the lettering, but also their behavior is stealthy in that it's not all the time. It's some overnights and the weekends. Free Spirit Mom is also worried about the cops because I'm a mom. They can interpret things and make things happen beyond my control. I can't defend myself against an unruly cop the same way I can defend myself against a criminal. And I think, again, with the criminal thing, my personal fear has never been about a situation where I'll get into a fight. It's a situation where, I'm not in the vehicle for some reason, or they assume no one's in the vehicle and therefore see it as a target, less so than being targeted while I am in the vehicle. And again, that's just because, for my situation, it just hasn't happened. I don't tend to make myself known if I'm just parking somewhere overnight, so they don't see who's driving this truck. For all they know, it's some big burly guy with a shotgun. They don't know. They don't see me. When I'm parking overnight, I arrive somewhere to park overnight. I go to sleep, and in the morning, I leave, and then I'm in a public place. So I'm not afraid of being targeted for being me, because in an ideal situation, they don't even know who's driving the truck. They just see a big truck, and even if it's being lived in, who's in there? Is it some big burly dude with a shotgun? Or, is it some tiny little woman who can't defend herself? They don't know because they don't see me. I park, I go to sleep, I leave in the morning. They've never seen who's actually driving this truck. They're not seeing a person get out of it. And that's a part of my general practice. And I don't know if that applies, but because it's a part of my general practice, I never feel like I'm going to be targeted for being me, because I feel like they're not going to see me, they're going to see the truck, and then they have to build a story based on what they see the truck is. So I actually want them to suspect somebody's in there, and I want them to not know for sure. And that's sort of the perfect way for people to think about it. It's like, I've seen 2 vehicles that are kind of doing the stealth thing around town, and I've literally never seen the people who are driving them. I've never seen the driver get out. I don't know who the driver is. I have noticed that they are city dwellers, like I have been, and such, but I never see them. Like, I don't know who's driving it. I don't know if they're cool or not. That's another reason I'm not just going to go knock on their door. Yeah, you know. But anyway. Layla Jean is very much in tune with me. Criminals, from vandalizing to stealing, I just can't deal with that. And that's my biggest fear with criminals, is vandalization and thievery. It's not being attacked. Just because I've dealt with vandalization and thievery, I have never dealt with being attacked at all. Or even a situation where it was bodily harm so much as property damage. So, like, when it comes to my fear of criminals, it's a fear of property damage more so than bodily harm. FDM215 says, I think I'd be fairly comfortable in a low profile van that is nothing too expensive or flashy. I think I'd be more worried about attracting thieves if my van is expensive, new looking. Sometimes, seems like you don't want anything too run down or too fancy. Both are likely to attract unwanted attention, and I absolutely feel this way. This is exactly how I feel. I don't want anything that other people want. At least not for it to be immediately apparent. Now, I am starting to, I guess this happens when you settle into a place and you have the space to do it. I am starting to have things in here where I'm like, man, it'd be really suck if somebody broke in here and stole that, because I'm having this nice setup that I'm starting to like. But especially early on, most of the time I took my laptop with me, and my laptop was like the thing. My laptop and my phone were with me most of the time, and those were the major things I didn't want stolen. There weren't a lot of things left behind. I had like a stove and you know, my batteries were really heavy, so I didn't think anybody was going to be able to just break in and grab those and run off with them real quick. And I didn't have a lot of little things that were easy to just grab and pull out. But then there's also the vehicle damage, so breaking in to like take the radio and all the other stuff, things people actually do, and those always scared me more than facing a physical confrontation. So like, people have all these rules or all these things they do for fear of physical confrontation, and that is so low on my list of worries compared to somebody breaking into the vehicle to steal or somebody damaging it just because. And so, like, I also, getting back to this comment, like living in that middle space where things aren't too nice. Like, when you look outside this box truck, you might think it's an RV, but you don't think it's a swanky RV. You don't think it's really nice in there. In fact, people have been surprised when they came in. Not to say it's swanky in here. It's not by a long shot. I've seen much swankier builds inside of a box truck, but the outside of it has this weird motorhome / industrial look, and I like that because it really makes people not expect that there's much in there to take. Now, that could reflect badly, and if somebody thinks, hey, this is a office construction vehicle. That can also happen because some people do have like work trucks where there are little offices inside and equipment that can be stolen, and that's something I definitely fear. But I like the idea of not looking too nice. Even in my previous vehicles, I want to look not like I have this rundown piece of junk where people are like, that's an eyesore, but also not so fancy and show-offy that people are like, I wonder what's in there. Like, I like living in as much this gray middle space as possible, because I do think that reduces the chance that somebody who's looking for something quote-unquote nice to steal will target you. Now, people who are like drug addicts and desperate or suffering from mental illness, they're on a different level. And I don't feel like they're any more of a threat to me as a vehicle dweller or as a city stealth van lifer than they were when I wasn't. So again, it's not something I worry about on this higher level due to stealth, living or anything like that. TS says, not scared of criminals. We have weapons, but they are the ones that bother us the most. Always trying to either steal the truck or something off of it. Cops don't even know we are here because we don't have windows. We have a skylight and roof vents. Happy travels. And again, see, it's like you have weapons, but that's not what you're being targeted for. And that's sort of my point. They're trying to steal the truck or steal something off of it. And I assume they're most likely you're trying to do it sneaky when you're not around. They're not. I assume that they're not in it for the confrontation. Like, people who want to do bodily harm are going to target you for bodily harm. People who want to steal a thing, they don't actually want to hurt you. If they run into you, they want to intimidate you enough that you will give it to them. But most of the time, especially people who target vehicles, they want to avoid running into someone. In fact, they may watch for you to leave your vehicle in order to target it. So in that case, the weapon's not going to help you. And I also think you need to measure weapons by who you know you are. Am I actually going to pull off hurting someone? Or is it highly likely they're just going to be able to wrestle this from me and then do me bodily harm with the weapon I have? And so you have to know who you are as a person and be honest about it. And it's not about changing who you are as a person. It's about being honest about who you are as a person and what's realistic for you if you do get into a confrontational situation, and not being delusional about that, you know? And that's sort of my feeling on that whole, like, the whole, like, being prepared for the physical confrontation. And like I said, 90% of what I'm worried about is not physical confrontation related. Is either, you know, they smash, they grab, they run, or they target the vehicle when I'm not there to do whatever it is they're seeking to do. That is way more scary to me than the threat of physical confrontation, because every time something has happened to a vehicle, even when I wasn't living in it, is because they were targeting an empty vehicle, and intending to target an empty vehicle. Victoria Hinton says the cops move along pretty standard fear. I've already talked about why this isn't kind of a huge thing for me. I've never had a cop knock. I've only had security knock, and it wasn't that bad. It was a conversation, and I moved on. And in fact, a couple of times, because I was polite, I've literally had a security guy go, "You can't stay here, but follow me. I'll show you where you can park." And so I followed him, and he dropped me off on a different part of the parking lot where he knew they wouldn't bother me all night. And he also knew I wasn't there all the time. I think he had seen me, and somebody had told him he needed to, like, make sure I moved on. And then there was this other shopping center where I developed this really cool, like, relationship with the security guard. And it was after she told me they noticed that my vehicle had been there all night and was still there during the day. And she was really sweet, and we kept running into each other. And when I came back to the shopping center, it was just a shop. And sometimes I would park in the back of the lot all day. And she would be really cool. And one time she came over, she was like, "Just to let you know, the manager's building is over there. So, like, if you need to hang out, don't park here, park over there." Like, I've had that happen as well. So it's just, my fear of the knock has been greatly reduced by my experience with the knock, I guess I can say. Janet the hip roaming with RA. The hip jip roaming with RA. Janet, I'm just gonna say Janet says, another vehicle running into me. And I was like, is that a real thing? Because I've just never been afraid of another vehicle running to me when I'm parked. If I'm parked in a parking lot, like, I'm in a parking lot, and half the time nothing happens overnight except for security cruising through. And if I'm parked on the street, it's parallel parking. And again, like, it just hasn't been even minutely close to happening. And so I was very smug about it, I will admit. And she went on to find stats that proves it actually is a thing, that a higher incident than I expected of vehicles getting hit while they are parked. And I know it happens. I just thought that's a weird thing that happens every once in a while. But it still doesn't bother me because it hasn't even been close to happening. It hasn't mildly happened. It hasn't, like, skirted the line, at least not as much as, like, vandalism, break-ins, and the possibility of a knock. They all are so much higher to me than the chance of somebody randomly running into me. In fact, I'd be more afraid of that on BLM land because there's no street lights, and somebody really well-intentioned could still, like, if you're in a crowded space where a lot of people are, like RTR and Schoolie Palooza, like, we're sort of making our own rules with parking when we're out on BLM in big groups. I'd be more scared of getting hit there than I would be street parking in a city, because it would just be such a random thing. And I haven't even been close to it in the city. Whereas just driving myself out on BLM land in situations where it's a little more crowded and there's more vehicles, like I said, there are no, like, roads. You're kind of making, I mean, there kind of are, but there's a lot more making your own rules about where you can drive. It's just a big open piece of public land where you're allowed to stay. And the chance of actually running into another vehicle or even something, especially because there's no street lights and it's a little more dark at night, it's way scarier to me there than other places. So again, with the criminal thing, it's just vandalism and thievery intimidates me way more than physical confrontation. Like, the things I hear about the most, even from other people in van life, is vandalism and thievery, and not so much getting into a fight. Now, I have heard weird things where somebody did get into the van while people were sleeping in it. Now, whether that person who got in knew somebody was in there or not, that's up for debate, and if it's more valuable or not for people to know you're in there. I have definitely converted to the mindset of, I'd like there to be a gray suspicion of somebody could be in there, and also reason to think, well, I don't know who that person is, so I don't want to confront them. And so in that case, they don't know if they're facing some big burly man or who's in there. And especially because I have such a big industrial truck, when people do see me, like during the day when I'm getting out, I get people who are like way impressed. They're like, whoa, that's not what I expected. I didn't expect this woman to walk out this big, like burly, very, industrial-esque truck. And I like that reaction, because it says to me, when they don't see me, they're thinking I'm somebody else. They don't think somebody who looks like me matches this truck on the outside. On the inside, it's just the nerd police. But from the outside, there isn't anything that's like, oh, there's a little black woman in there. A little not that fit black woman who probably couldn't win a fight. They don't know who's in here. And the stereotype associated with a big rugged truck like this is not someone who looks like me, which I think is to my advantage. And again, it's also not too fancy. Like, is it worth it? If somebody is living in there, they're living in a box truck with a little clearly damaged in the past corner, with a little bit of a smashed in side door. If they won't even fix that, there probably isn't anything worthwhile in there. And again, all we can do is project our thoughts onto other people. So yeah, let's wrap this thing up. So right now I have the convenience of a driveway where I am allowed to park, and I don't really have to quote unquote hide anything. And I still practice the same practices of being polite, being quiet, and keeping to myself. And I think in a way it kind of freaks out them, because it's like, is she okay? Like, should we be worried about her? And so my practice of being polite is to be quiet, unobtrusive, and not bother people, which can have a mixed reaction from people who haven't lived this lifestyle. And it's actually taken me a while to get used to the idea of not only parking in the same place all the time, but that it's allowed and okay. I even have power and access to fill up my water as needed. The first time I had a couple days off in a row, I actually drove off and did some street parking because it felt more normal to me than just sitting in the same spot all the time. And then I would return to the driveway for the work week. In fact, I did this consistently for a couple of weeks. I didn't go anywhere special. I just felt like I needed to park elsewhere because I was always here. Mostly just, I think I needed to prove to myself I was still entirely self-sufficient. If my circumstances change on a dime, I just need to know I can still make it. It might be that I've actually developed safety in being nomadic. Not necessarily a traveler, but nomadic. And I do consider static van lifers nomadic by lifestyle, because it is a transient, rather that transientness is 1 mile or 20 miles or halfway around the block. It's still transient, and that's what makes it nomadic. But in my case, I actually see a home I can't drive away as less safe and secure than one that drives away. It actually gives me peace of mind to know I can leave with everything, as opposed to being pushed out and losing everything. I don't know if that's good or bad. Maybe it's just trauma. I just know that's how I personally feel. If I'm honest, I am always a little prepped to drive away if I need to. And like I said, maybe that's just a trauma of having been forced into living in a car and not picking this journey in the very, very beginning. In fact, that's why I am focused on these types of videos now, not videos of my day and stuff like that. I want to support those who, like me, are making that transition from a force point to a choice point under inconvenient circumstances. But as a kid who had a mom who just wasn't all that into traveling, rest in peace, Mom. I love you. I'd always dreamed of packing a bag and hitting the road as an adult. Not because I hated my mom, I adored her really. But I knew there was so much more to the world out there and I wanted to see it. And as a poor adult, working from paycheck to paycheck, travel felt so inaccessible. I now enjoy the fact I have access to travel now at the turn of a key on minimal money. But I also like that I can settle in a zone for a long stretch, be that city or BLM land or some other type of situation, and be comfy. And that's why, though I didn't enter this life at this stage by choice, I still stay in it by choice because it gives me the choices I want. And I don't feel limited to being in a city or not being in a city. And that's what's important to me. I have the choice not only to live in a vehicle because I want to, but the choice to be city dweller, out in the boonies, change it up as I like to. I enjoy that choice. And if I couldn't do it and just be comfortable and live and was always panicked about hiding in the back of my rig, it wouldn't be a happy life. So the thing that ruins stealth really is your behavior. And I think as long as you understand what behaviors make you look suspicious, cause trouble, and sort of ruin the situation of people just looking other the way, you'll be fine. Don't over panic about ruining stealth. It'll be okay. Before I wrap up this video, I do want to say if you do have fears, those fears are justified if your experience has validated those fears. I think we have to find a balance between real fear and projected fear into a situation. So if you actually have dealt with cops harassing you, I am not here to invalidate that for you, even though I haven't had that particular thing as part of my experience. It's still very real if it has happened to you, and you can say in my area, I know for sure that has happened to me. So I don't want to take that away from anybody. We all only have our own experiences to read from. So I hope I in no way came off as invalidating anyone's fears about stealth living or being forced to live in a car and sort of experiences that have been opposite to mine. So yeah. Anyway, I want to thank all of my supporters on Patreon and YouTube memberships. You guys are great. I'm trying to really focus on having fun with this channel, but this channel is a part of the YouTube community and therefore is also a victim of the YouTube algorithm. So if you want to throw me a like or a subscribe or a comment in the comment section or just watch videos all the way till the end, that is supporting me as well. YouTube memberships and Patreon are just an extra step, and I appreciate everyone in any way they contribute.